Most writers don't struggle with the lack of talent. They struggle because they're focusing on the wrong thing. And if you want to become a better writer, you need to actually practice the art of writing. And in this video, I'm going to share the tips on how I practice to become a better writer. Stick around till the end because the last advice is one of the things that most writers, the mistakes that most writers are making, and you don't want to miss that because you don't want to fall into that category. If we haven't met before, hello, my name is Natalie. I'm an author and a growth marketer, and I help writers accelerate their author career so that they can live out their dreams. So follow along on this journey where I try to become a best-selling author. So the first thing that you need to do is start reading more. And not just in the way you think, not just reading the books that you have at home. You need to start reading a lot more deliberately. Read like a writer, because when you read like a writer, things will start happening. I think this is one of the key things that writers who want to become better at the craft, writing craft, the mistake that they make, because like a lot of us fell in love with writing because we love reading. I am one of those. I read so much when I was younger and fled into fantasy worlds, and it's amazing, and that's the reason why I wanted to become an author. But nowadays when I read, sometimes I do read for fun, definitely, but with some books I read them to learn. I read them to become a better author, and this is what you need to do. You need to start highlighting scenes that you think are written in a suspenseful or good way. You need to start looking for words that you think, like when someone is describing a rose in a new way, like if someone is doing that in a book in a way that is mind-blowing to you, that you think is a very beautiful metaphor for a rose or for love or whatever it is, save that. Be a lot more deliberate about what you read, and save that in either in a folder on your phone, or I use the app Readwise. This is not sponsored by them, but I really love them. I use the app Readwise, and I highlight the parts of the book that I like. It can be sentences, it can be words, and that will also say which page it was on, which author and stuff like that, which is really good for me because then I can, take it out and use it in a more, like if I write nonfiction and want to have a quote from a book or whatever it is, or if I write an essay or, yeah. Okay, I am rambling a little bit here, but I do think this is something that a lot of writers underestimate. If you write "the engine started," that's just writing "the engine started." But if you write "the engine started" and it crackled like sandpaper, with the second one you can actually hear it, you can actually feel it in another way. And this is what great writers do. They will create an image that is so vivid to the reader that it will, launch their imagination. And another great thing about reading more deliberately is the fact that you will get to know the genres you're writing in. I try to study as much as I can the genres I am writing in, just to be able to meet the reader expectations, but also to see, what is trending, what is working, what other authors are doing, so that I can get inspired by that and try to write something that would inspire me and that really works for me. So try to study others and learn from them. Never ever ever copy them, but learn from them and get inspired by them. Because at the end of the day also, one thing I've heard writers say is the fact that, oh no, I can't do that because I don't want to be copying anyone else when I'm writing in the same genre. Well, I don't think you should be afraid of that, because if you and I started writing from the same prompt, like if we had a prompt that said, write a story about a fly that lives on a rose petal. If we were to write that, it would be completely different texts, no matter what. So, because we work different, we have different history, a lot of things that we take into our own writing. So I don't think that you should be afraid of like copying anyone else or stuff like that, because you don't write like anyone else. You write like you. Your uniqueness, your voice, that is what creates your, you know, your tone of voice and your authorship. So don't be afraid of that. And like, if this is something that you're struggling with and that is why you don't read as much, then read the book Steal Like an Artist. Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. This is a great book that explains the fact that, you know, nothing that we do is original. It's great for inspiration and to like get out of that blockage that it can be when you think you might be copying someone. So if that is what you're struggling with, read this book. So awesome. Now we got step number 1 done. So let's move on. So tip number 2 is to write first. I think this is also something that when I want to create something that is great, I start by just writing the first draft. And the first draft, it's okay that it's shitty. It's okay that it's not that good, because it's not supposed to be good. The first draft is you telling yourself the story, and that's it. So just write the first draft. Don't think about how to write like the perfect love scene. Don't think about the metaphors you're going to use to enhance the story. Don't think about tone, voice, anything like that. That comes later. We're going to talk about that later in this video. But first, just make sure to write consistently, get writer's flow, and get a first draft done. That's all, that's it. And once you've done that, we move on to step number 3, okay? And step number 3, so between step number 2 and step number 3 is the fact that you need to let the manuscript rest. So let it rest, the longer the better, because, you know, the more distance you get from the story, the easier it will be for you to read it like a reader. But I know, like for me also, I'm a very restless person. I want to write every day. I want to move forward. So for me, letting a manuscript rest for some time is hard. So I usually just start writing the next story, or have multiple stories in parallel that I'm working on, because otherwise it wouldn't work for me. But you need to find a way that works for you. But step number 3 is to edit. So edit later. And when you edit, I want you to have a plan. Don't just think that you're going to edit the manuscript once, because you're not. You're going to edit it multiple times, and each and every single time, I want you to focus on different things. So the first time, I want you to focus on the big strokes. Make sure that you have all the plot points there, all the story beats, and that the characters are hitting their inner journey, their hero's journey, or whichever inner journey they're going through. Because if those things aren't there, it doesn't matter if you have a beautiful language, because the story isn't ready. And if you start going into the nitty-gritty the first time you edit, looking at grammar, which words should I use here for it to be perfect, you might end up deleting that chapter that you spent a week on. So this is why I think working on the big things first, make sure you have the foundation of the house there and the walls before you, the foundation of the house there before you start working on other things, before you start deciding, you know, what kind of paint you're going to have on the walls. And after that, you will go through, maybe you look at the dialogues and the characters and make sure that they differ from each other. And in the later parts of your editing, you will go through the language. And this is when your manuscript will actually go from being an okay story, probably, to becoming great. Or to becoming good and then becoming great. One thing that I do to make sure that my stories lift from, you know, being okay to becoming a lot better is that I hire an editor. And there are different types of editors, so you need to do the research and look at what you can afford and what you can do. But you make sure that you have someone who's not you, who looks at your story and gives you constructive feedback on how to improve. They can look at both the story beats or the copy editing or both, or yeah. But having someone else looking at it will help you improve so much. But also be intentional and ask them. Tell them right now you're working on becoming a better writer, so that they will take an extra look at your language, your tone, your voice, because the best way is to have someone telling you, okay, you're overusing this word, you should use show not tell here, the language is a bit crackly in this part, or you're using passive tense instead of active. Have an expert helping you. Step number 4, and this is, I usually do this at the end, like when I've done the last edit, then I read my text out loud. This is when I find if the sentences are working or not, if the style is there, if it's actually a good story, like if the language is where I want it to be. Because when it comes to good writing, like, you know, most of us, we already know how to write the story beats and the hero's journey and all of those things. But lifting our story from here to here, that is the hard part, and that is why you need to like slow down a lot. And the way that I slow down best is to read it out loud, because if I don't read it out loud, I will fill in the blanks if there's some word missing or whatever. Because when I read my own story, my head already know where we're going, so it might skip a few words. So I think it's really important to read it out loud to see that it is where you want it to be. And when you read it out loud, so this is step number 5, or tip number 5, you will start noticing what kind of voice you have as an author. And now we're getting into the really good part, which is voice, tone, and style. First of all, we're talking about voice, okay? So to understand voice is not just personality, it's the pattern behind your writing. It shows up in your word choice, the rhythm of your sentences. This is what will make you unique. So, don't try to be someone else or use someone else's voice. But like if we go back to tip number 1, which was reading, this is also something that you can look out for. So I know that some suspense authors, they use really short sentences to create a voice that is almost like hurried, like you're in a rush, while other authors use really long and vivid, almost flowery painting sentences, which creates an entire different voice. So this is something that you can study in others to become inspired and to learn to write in a different voice depending on what kind of story you're creating. An example to just show how different it can be is if you write "he did not respond," that sounds, fairly formal. But if you instead write "he didn't say a word," that feels a lot more natural and direct. Tone, on the other hand, that is how your writing feels like to the author. So all of these things go hand in hand a little bit and will overlap, but tone is your punctuation, your commas, the word choice, how fast paced your story is, the sentence length, or the imagery that you paint for the reader. And your POV also affects the tone of your story. If you write in first person, that would be a lot more close up, a lot more personal for the reader. And third person might seem a bit more, distance and far away. So remember that, like, depending on what kind of feeling you want to create, POV is very important too. Style, on the other hand, it's what happens consistently over time. So these are the patterns that you keep on repeating in the long run. Like if you prefer certain kind of details or a certain kind of metaphors or similes, like these things are something you will be able to improve and make better over time, but don't really stress about it right now, because depending on how many books you've already written, like this is something you will learn. And your style will also, like, you will have a different style depending on the fact if you want to be super descriptive about the environment or what is happening, or if you want to, you know, maybe just write the plot more. Like, those are very different styles, and different readers prefer different things. And last but not least, I'm going to talk about the mistakes I see writers making. One of the things that a lot of writers keep on doing is overusing weak verbs. This is something that you shouldn't have to say that she screamed loudly, for example. If someone screams, it's already loud. You don't need to add the adverb to enhance it. So, like, think about the fact that the reader is a lot smarter than you think, so don't overuse these sort of fluff words and enhancer words, because you don't need them. It's only going to bother the reader, and it's only going to make, you know, your style and tone seem weaker. Another thing I see authors doing is trying to edit whilst writing, and this will slow down your text, and you will also lose focus on the story. So I say, write first, edit later, and edit different things in different times. Because if you try to write and edit, unless you're Stephen King, it's not going to help you become a better writer, because you will try to have too many things in your head at the same time, which none of us can do. We need to try and hyper-focus on one step at a time. Another common mistake is explaining emotions instead of showing them. I know that show don't tell is something we hear a lot, but when it comes to writing a better story, you also need to actually do it. Like, show, whenever there is a scene that really matters to your story, for me, that's when I will go through it again and again to make sure that I am showing the fact that you know, she has a connection to that man, or I will try to show what is happening in a way so that the reader actually feels it happening in their bodies, and they know what I am, you know, showing, what feelings the character have without saying it. So that's all for today. But remember that writing is not about waiting for inspiration. It's about showing up again and again, improving bit by bit with every word we write. If you follow these principles, you will improve faster than most writers. And if you actually want to write faster and better, watch the backstory paradox up next. Thank you for today.